everybody, and welcome back. So to follow up from our tutorial about the four humours, we want to look specifically at the character of Lady Macbeth, a character who is most distinctly a choleric personality and who is ultimately the driving force for the start of the action for Macbeth. But certainly she is not the only character, and so not the only character who's responsible. And so we're often challenged when we analyse Lady Macbeth to consider whether she warrants being referred to as the fourth witch. Okay, so when we think about the relationship between Lady Macbeth and the witches, there's often this association that Lady Macbeth and the witches are evil, and that we are well within our rights as readers of literature to see her as having an equal capacity for evil as the witches do. What that ignores, of course, is the fact that the witches, as people who have been cast out of society, maybe are quite justified in their position in rejecting the judgment of society, and that Lady Macbeth, if she is indeed equal to the witches, has every right to feel that she too can stand up and take what's hers, because she has also been marginalised by society. Now, you might say, well, Lady Macbeth ends up ultimately as the Queen of Scotland. It's really hard to consider that she's marginalised. I would draw your attention to the fact that we never actually see Lady Macbeth outside of her home. Now, that's obviously stylistically appropriate for the play. She's a character, a female character who is the lady of a manor, so it makes sense that she's there. It is contextually appropriate. The place of women in the 17th century was their home. But when we consider the capacity that Lady Macbeth has to lead, the capacity she has to make decisions, we can certainly appreciate why a character with her intelligence and her dynamism maybe wants to get out of the house. So in the same way that we analysed Macbeth, I have prepared our act-by-act summary of her character. And I would like to sort of draw your attention to the fact that while I'm showing you what I found in the characterization of Lady Macbeth, it is not the only element. They're not the only elements that you'll find. I really would encourage you to offer your own interpretation of her as a character and to explore whatever you can from the script and offer your evaluation. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got. So again, I've used the Sydney Theatre Company template, which is on our Padlet, and the link will be in the descriptor of this video again below. And I've drawn out Lady Macbeth across the 5 acts. Now remember, Lady Macbeth does not exist in isolation from Macbeth. So where I've given you particular little clues of things to look for in the change of Macbeth's nature, you can think about how that might impact on Lady Macbeth. I mean, she doesn't even get her own name. So the reality is her fortunes are tied to Macbeth, even if Macbeth doesn't involve her in the decision-making after about Act 2. Okay, so when we first see Lady Macbeth, we see her in her home in Act 1, Scene 5, when she is provided with the information about the prophecies in a letter. Now, our initial assessment of her is that she is probably, a reasonably, we might say, driven woman, but an Jacobean audience would certainly see her as quite masculine. She offers an immediate assessment of her husband's capacity to act on the prophecies, that he's too full of the milk of human kindness, and that he would not take the most direct action to achieve his outcomes, because he likes the rewards, he doesn't like the hard work. And so rather than say, well, that's it, too bad, so sad, I guess we're not going to get anything, she actually calls upon the spirits. Now, there's our first clue that she's ultimately going to be an antagonistic character. We don't evoke spirits if we're good Christian women, but she evokes spirits and challenges masculine, feminine stereotypes. So stereotypes, that's a stylistic device, or rather an aesthetic feature that you can explore, and says, unsex me here. So take away the trappings of femininity that I'm expected to to develop and to demonstrate, and instead fill me with the direst cruelty. So let me be as masculine as I needed my husband to be so that I can actually, enact this. It's interesting that it is through Lady Macbeth then that we further develop this idea that the witches first present, which is this idea of pretense versus reality. When she says, well, you're going to have to look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent underneath. And she does exactly that. She actually demonstrates that for us when she plays the gracious hostess in Duncan's Arrival. And that is important to note. We see a woman with the capacity to make decisions. We see a woman with the capacity to act. We see a woman with the capacity to take matters into her own hands. It's very unladylike for the era, which actually is part of that subversion of natural order. And we should probably recognize that while we might admire her decisiveness now, an audience in the 1700s would find that really challenging. But her character, as the story begins to unfold, is going to change. So in Act 2, of course, the first things we hear from her is that she has been drinking, because the thing that she needed them to consume to fall asleep, she actually needs to make her bold. So she's actually sort of embraced Dutch courage so that she can help Macbeth with this murder. The scene immediately following the murder reveals, the last of their perhaps Act 1 artifice. So we see Macbeth saying, oh, this is disgusting. I can't believe I've done this. His initial emotional reaction, we're not going to see again. But we see from Lady Macbeth, a little water washes us off this deed. Come on, it's done. What's done is done. Let's get on with it. Next thing. And that's the last time we're going to see that from her, because while Macbeth's story becomes one of the decisions that he makes and how those impact him and others, Lady Macbeth's story becomes about the consequences of the decision she made and how she actually decides how she can live with that. And ultimately, by the end of Act 5, we know she can't live with that. The reason that we did the introduction to the humours, of course, is that she is the character that actually explains much of the humours to us, and that is seen quite often in Act 2. All right, in our second page then, when we focus on Act 3, I have made mention there that you should specifically think about the change in relationship here. Now, I want you to think of the change in relationship for two reasons. One, it's actually showing you something about Macbeth's character. He doesn't need Lady Macbeth. But because their fortunes are tied together, she is the lady of his name. Her fortune's still tied to him, but she's not included in the decision-making now. So how would we feel if we were cut out of the decisions made by the people in our family that ultimately affected us, but to which we were not privy? And so what we actually see is a number of references to that idea. Naught's had all spent where our desires got without content. So there's no point to any of this if I'm not settled in it. So we're starting to see the hints of guilt or remorse. She says to Macbeth, why do you keep alone? So why is your counsel now with murderers and not with your wife? And while she is still covering for him at the banquet, he is no longer, the decision to do so is one that she makes herself. So she's standing out in the cold. It's important that that's the last time we really see Lady Macbeth until Act 5. Act 4 is entirely about the decisions that Macbeth is making then. So when we see the murder of the Macduffs, Lady Macbeth isn't even featured on the stage. She doesn't enter that scene. So the murder of Lady Macduff could symbolically be seen as a murder of Lady Macbeth also. No longer do we see our wife as someone important to us, insofar as we're not consulting her, and we're also not really caring if these decisions come back to bite us. And so the way that Lady Macbeth's guilt, Lady Macbeth's loneliness, Lady Macbeth's isolation manifests is in Act 5, when all of what is happening is really unnatural. So she's sleepwalking. She's actually writing letters. She's confessing to things, but just little snippets of things, and they're quite chilling. What it is that she says, and the nature of what it is, the nature of her confession. She is revealing stuff that she shouldn't be revealing, but she's actually unpacking it in such a way that she's telling you how she feels about herself as much as how she feels about those crimes. And we see that link back to the motifs. So, we've got the rubbing of the hand, the out damn spot. So we get those links to blood, we get the links to the crimes, to the guilt, and that in the only way that she can actually reconcile her story, according to the doctor, is to confess. And ultimately, because she can't confess, because she still, I guess, feels a sense of loyalty to Macbeth, she dies. Now, there certainly is conjecture that she takes her own life, but perhaps simply stripped of everything that made her who she was, she could no longer live. All right, so her health had deteriorated so much that she could just not live. All right, so that's short and sharp. And certainly there's a lot more to discuss about the character of Lady Macbeth. What's important now, of course, as you are beginning, as many of you are finishing your script, it's developing that understanding for yourself. How does a character change across the course of the script? What's the key idea from Act 1? How do I link just Lady Macbeth's scenes? Or how do I just link Macbeth's scenes? And what does that tell me about the themes or the motifs? So I'm going to post this one. The next time that we chat, we'll be looking at the scene summaries and how it is that we can begin some different strategies for exploring the play and developing our own working knowledge. But until then, see you later.